how Sakuna will cheat the sure hit of Higuruma's blade and prove everybody right that Sakuna is undoubtedly Gogo's favorite character in the whole series. So as we know, Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 247 left on a major cliffhanger. Higuruma leaves everything to Yuji, and just before the blade reaches Sakuna, the chapter ends. So unequivocally, Sakuna is not dying here. It's only a matter of how and what sort of nerf we can expect from the blow. So first, it's important to consider Sakuna is very intelligent, perhaps one of the most intelligent characters in the series when it comes to cursed energy. He also knows the rules of the Executioner's Blade, as he was given an in-depth, detailed explanation. And like Gojo, he can also observe a cursed technique and understand how that technique works, even without the 6 eyes. So with that in mind, we should also assume that likely he has a better grasp of the Executioner's Blade than Higuruma himself. So as readers, we can also presume that the Blade's sure kill is an effective targeting the soul directly, thus it cannot be healed. Likely, the blade is very similar to Maki's soul split katana, except the Executioner's sword also has the sure hit of Higuruma's domain embedded within the sword, just like Sakuna's previous cursed tool. So logically, there's a couple of ways I see Sakuna surviving, the most logical scenario being this. In the past, we have seen Sakuna avoid death or losing to Gojo by transferring a sure hit technique to Megumi's soul instead. Now of course this begs the question, but it's stated the Executioner's Blade is only toward the person who was found guilty. And while this is correct, it does not mean Sakuna still cannot transfer damage. Why? In the chapter where Sakuna uses Megumi's soul as a substitute for his own, remember that a domain does not randomly target anyone, it specifically targets anyone within it. Thus, it's a sure hit that targets a person within its limits or anybody who violates the rules of that domain. There is no difference between the sure hit of the blade in regards to a domain. I believe the point Giga was trying to get across is that the blade will not just target Megumi or anybody randomly. That being said, no person is immune to the blade, it simply will not mistake you for its target. But in special circumstances, that does not mean the blade damage cannot be manipulated. Knowing this, Sakuna can do the same thing with the blade that he did with Gojo's domain. There's several flaws that might come to mind, and luckily I'm here to explain why it all makes sense. 2 questions. If Sakuna is capable of diverting damage outside of a domain to Megumi's soul, why not do that throughout his battle with Gojo? 1, because Gojo's attacks are physical and he has no issue healing that with RCT, especially since his curse energy usage is very efficient. 2, harming Megumi's soul also affects him long term because if Megumi dies, so does he. And that's what we see, right? When Sakuna is absolutely pushed to use Megumi's soul as a mask, that's what he does to survive, but it's not something he's going to do unless he absolutely unequivocally has to. In this instance, he has to do that. He has to split the damage between them. The second question is, how does Megumi survive if he basically uses Megumi as a shield? And the answer is he would have to split that damage between them unevenly, right? Because Megumi has already taken damage from Gojo's domain. So his soul is probably very weakened. I would say anywhere from 30 to 60%. So that means Sakuna would take around 80 and Megumi would take whatever the difference is. So what would that look like, right? I would totally see Megumi or Sakuna reverting back into Meguna, simply because as of now, their souls do not communicate. They're no longer at a tug of war because Sakuna is reincarnated. Their souls no longer interact. So that means that in order for him to do that, he would have to make a binding vow saying, I'll revert back into the symbiotic parasitic relationship so that we're sharing a body and I am no longer reincarnated. I'm no longer just a body, right? So that's what that would look like. That would nerf Sakuna a lot because his soul would be harmed, but that would also give Megumi the kind of leverage he needs to gain his consciousness back, sort of start reducing the output of Sakuna's attacks again. That would nerf him, that would give the main cast a sort of chance, and that would also give Megumi the opportunity to start fighting back, to start trying to come back, because as of now, there's just simply no chance Megumi gets any sort of consciousness, any sort of say in his body at this point. If the leaks are true, right, and we do see Gojo, then that could very well be from Megumi's perspective. And what that would look like, right, is either Megumi is about to die, Sakuna figures out a way to kill Megumi instead, and that's what we see is his final thoughts of him meeting Gojo, or we see that kind of split, and Megumi gets his consciousness back enough to have a sort of flashback, because either way Megumi is going to be affected in some way, shape, or form. If Megumi has a flashback, then he has to be consciousness some way, shape, or form, and I think that's what we're going to see next chapter.